The woman surrounded by airport security was the same woman the airport could not afford to lose. Monica Hayes adjusted the strap of her leather travel bag and glanced at the departure board one final time. Her flight was scheduled to begin boarding in less than 20 minutes. The airport around her buzzed with the usual rhythm of rolling suitcases, boarding announcements, and hurried conversations. To everyone passing through the terminal, it looked like an ordinary afternoon. For Monica, it was simply another stop in a week filled with meetings, presentations, and long flights. Dressed in a navy blazer, dark slacks, and comfortable travel shoes, she blended easily into the crowd. There were no luxury logos, no visible signs of wealth, and certainly nothing that suggested she was the founder and chief executive officer of one of the largest infrastructure development firms in the country. Monica preferred it that way. She had learned long ago that people often revealed their true character when they did not know who she was. She arrived at gate 42 and found an empty seat near the boarding area. Pulling a folder from her bag, she reviewed several notes related to an upcoming transportation initiative. The project had taken years of planning and involved partnerships with cities, businesses, and public agencies across multiple states. The details mattered. Thousands of jobs and countless travelers would benefit from its success. Monica focused on the documents while passengers gathered around the gate. Nearby, a woman named Linda Foster watched her from across the waiting area. Linda was well-dressed and carried herself with confidence. At first, her attention lingered only briefly. Then she looked again. Something about Monica caused Linda to form an opinion before a single word had been exchanged. Monica noticed none of it. She remained absorbed in her work. Linda continued watching. The more she observed, the more convinced she became that Monica seemed out of place. She could not explain why. There was no evidence, no behavior that justified concern. Yet assumptions often arrive long before facts. A few minutes later, Linda approached the gate counter and spoke quietly with an airline employee. The conversation lasted less than a minute. The employee listened politely and nodded. Whatever concern Linda had expressed appeared minor, and the employee returned to work. But Linda did not seem satisfied. Her eyes drifted back toward Monica. Several other passengers began noticing the exchange. Curiosity spread through the waiting area. Monica calmly turned another page in her folder. Across the terminal, 2 airport security officers moved through the concourse conducting routine patrols. Their presence was ordinary. Airports were full of uniformed personnel. Most travelers barely noticed them. Yet within minutes, one of the officers received a call through his radio. He paused, listened carefully, and exchanged a glance with his partner. Together, they changed direction and began walking toward gate 42. Monica remained seated, unaware that attention was beginning to focus on her. Linda noticed the officers immediately. A subtle expression of satisfaction crossed her face. Nearby passengers followed her gaze and watched the security officers approach. Conversations grew quieter. People became curious. Monica finally looked up from her documents as the 2 officers entered the boarding area. Their pace was calm and professional. There was no urgency, yet their destination appeared obvious. They were heading directly toward her. Monica closed her folder and placed it neatly inside her bag. Her expression remained composed. Years of leadership had taught her that panic rarely solved anything. Around the gate, travelers began paying closer attention. Some looked away quickly. Others stared openly. Within moments, an ordinary wait for boarding had transformed into something else entirely. And as the security officers stopped just a few feet from Monica Hayes, not a single person in that boarding area realized that the woman drawing so much suspicion was also the one person an entire group of airport executives was desperately expecting to arrive. Officer Daniel Pierce stopped a few feet from Monica Hayes and offered a professional nod. His partner remained nearby, while travelers throughout the gate area watched with growing curiosity. The sudden attention transformed an ordinary boarding area into an uncomfortable stage. Monica stood calmly and met the officer's gaze. "Good afternoon, ma'am," Daniel said. "Would you mind answering a few questions?" Monica smiled politely. Of course. Around them, conversations faded. People who had been checking phones moments earlier now paid close attention. Linda Foster sat a short distance away, watching carefully. Daniel glanced at a small tablet in his hand before speaking again. "We received a report regarding some concerns in the boarding area." Monica remained composed. "What kind of concerns?" Daniel chose his words carefully. Nothing specific at this time. We are simply following procedure and verifying information. Monica nodded. I understand. Her calm response seemed almost surprising to some of the people watching. There was no frustration in her voice, no defensive reaction, no attempt to argue. She simply listened. Daniel asked to see her identification and boarding pass. Monica provided both immediately. He reviewed the documents and compared the information to his screen. Everything appeared normal. Yet because a report had been made, protocol required additional questions. Nearby passengers exchanged quiet looks. The presence of security often encouraged assumptions. Some travelers began imagining reasons for the interaction despite having no facts at all. Linda interpreted the scene as validation of her original suspicions. She folded her arms and watched with growing confidence. Daniel continued professionally. What is the purpose of your trip today? Business, Monica replied. How long will you be traveling? Several days. Will you be attending meetings? Yes. Her answers were simple and direct. Daniel noticed something unusual. Most travelers subjected to unexpected questioning became nervous. Monica did not. She answered every question calmly and respectfully. Her composure made it difficult to reconcile the concerns that had prompted the interaction in the first place. Still, procedure was procedure. A second airport employee approached and quietly spoke with Daniel. The conversation lasted only seconds, but it drew even more attention. Soon nearly everyone near Gate 42 seemed aware that something was happening. Monica stood patiently beside her seat while strangers formed opinions from a distance. Across the terminal, electronic displays continued announcing departures and arrivals. Families hurried toward connecting flights. Business travelers rushed through the concourse. Yet inside another section of the airport, a completely different kind of activity was underway. Several senior executives gathered in a conference suite overlooking the main terminal. Schedules covered the table. Event planners reviewed timelines. Airport leadership appeared focused on a single issue. An important guest was expected soon. Every detail had been prepared months in advance. The arrival mattered. Back at Gate 42, Daniel completed another verification step. Everything continued returning the same result. Monica's identification matched. Her reservation was valid. Her travel history showed nothing unusual. The concerns that had triggered the report seemed increasingly difficult to justify. Yet the situation had already attracted attention, and attention had a way of creating its own momentum. A passenger standing nearby whispered to another traveler. Someone else glanced toward Monica and then toward the officers. The story was growing despite the lack of evidence supporting it. Monica noticed the looks. She noticed the whispers. But she remained remarkably calm. Years of leadership had taught her that dignity was often most important when others expected the opposite. Daniel finally handed back her identification. Thank you for your cooperation, he said. We may need a few more minutes. Take all the time you need, Monica replied. Her answer caught him off guard. There was no resentment, no irritation, just confidence. As Daniel stepped aside to review one final notification on his device, he had no way of knowing that somewhere else inside the airport, a completely different conversation had just begun. A group of executives was asking the same question repeatedly. Where is Monica Hayes? And before long, that question would change everything happening at Gate 42. The atmosphere around Gate 42 changed in a way that everyone could feel, but nobody openly acknowledged. What had started as a routine security inquiry was becoming a public spectacle. Travelers who had never spoken to Monica Hayes now watched her from across the waiting area, as though they already knew her story. Some glanced at her, and then at the security officers. Others whispered quietly before looking away. Assumptions were spreading faster than facts. Monica remained standing near her seat, her travel bag resting beside her. Her posture never changed. Her expression remained calm. She did not look embarrassed, angry, or intimidated. If anything, she appeared more composed than many of the people observing her. Officer Daniel Pierce noticed it as well. During his years working airport security, he had seen countless travelers react to unexpected questioning. Some became frustrated. Others became nervous. Monica didn't either. She simply waited patiently while procedures continued. Yet the crowd seemed determined to reach conclusions long before the process ended. Linda Foster sat nearby with growing confidence. From her perspective, The presence of security justified every suspicion she had formed earlier. She noticed other passengers watching and interpreted their curiosity as agreement. The more attention the situation received, the more convinced she became that she had been right to raise concerns. Across the gate area, a businessman folded his newspaper and focused entirely on the scene. A family waiting near the boarding lane lowered their voices. Even airline employees occasionally glanced toward Monica while continuing their work. Without realizing it, nearly everyone had chosen a side. Most sided with the security officers simply because uniforms carried authority. Monica stood alone. Daniel stepped aside to review additional information on his device. The results remained unchanged. Monica's identification was valid. Her travel records were normal. Her reservation matched perfectly. Nothing suggested a problem. Yet because attention had already gathered around the situation, ending it quickly no longer felt simple. The crowd had created its own momentum. Every extra minute seemed to confirm suspicions that had never been supported by evidence in the first place. Monica understood what was happening. She had experienced similar situations throughout her career. People often mistook confidence for arrogance. They mistook calmness for secrecy. They mistook appearances for facts. Years earlier, those experiences might have frustrated her. Now they simply reminded her of how easily assumptions could influence judgment. Nearby, boarding preparations continued. Airline staff updated departure information while passengers checked watches and phones. The ordinary rhythm of airport life continued around the unusual scene at Gate 42. Meanwhile, several hundred yards away inside an executive conference suite, concern was growing rapidly. Airport executives reviewed schedules and arrival information. One name appeared repeatedly throughout the event documents: Monica Hayes. Her arrival time had passed. Her phone had gone unanswered during the past several minutes. The delay was beginning to attract attention. Richard Bennett, executive chairman of the Airport Development Authority, studied the schedule again. "Has anyone confirmed where Monica is?" he asked. Several people shook their heads. An assistant quickly reviewed incoming travel information. Another checked arrival records. The answer remained unclear. Back at Gate 42, Monica calmly picked up her portfolio and held it at her side. The simple movement drew even more attention from nearby travelers. Some seemed to expect a confrontation. Others waited for security to discover something important. Instead, nothing happened. Monica simply stood quietly while Daniel continued verifying information that was already proving her completely legitimate. The contrast between expectation and reality grew larger with every passing minute. Then a notification appeared on a screen inside the executive suite. An airport employee looked closely at the information and froze. A boarding record, a gate assignment, a location. For the first time all afternoon, someone knew exactly where Monica Hayes was. And within seconds, that information would begin moving through the airport faster than any rumor ever could. Inside the executive conference suite, the atmosphere shifted instantly. The airport employee turned the monitor toward Richard Bennett and pointed at the screen. A boarding record had finally connected the missing arrival to a specific location. Gate 42. Richard stared at the information for only a moment before standing. "Gate 42, he repeated. "Are you certain?" The employee nodded. "Yes, sir. Her boarding information was updated less than an hour ago. She is there right now." Richard exchanged looks with the other executives in the room. Weeks of preparation had centered around one person. Months of coordination had led to this day. Yet somehow, the guest they had been waiting for was sitting alone at a departure gate while the airport searched for her everywhere else. "We need to contact her immediately," one executive said. Another reached for a phone. Richard shook his head. "No. Let us find out exactly what is happening first." Back at Gate 42, Monica Hayes remained calm despite the growing attention around her. The waiting area felt different now. More passengers had noticed the security presence. More people were watching. Every glance seemed to carry an opinion. Yet Monica refused to let any of it affect her. She sat back down, folded her hands over her portfolio, and waited patiently. Officer Daniel Pierce stood nearby reviewing another update on his device. The information remained consistent. There was no security concern, no irregularity, no violation. Every verification returned the same result. Monica was exactly who her documents said she was. Yet Daniel found himself reluctant to simply walk away. The situation had become complicated by perception. A crowd had gathered around an idea before anyone had gathered around facts. Linda Foster watched from across the gate with growing impatience. She expected something dramatic to happen. She expected security to uncover a reason that justified her suspicions. Instead, every passing minute seemed to produce the opposite result. Monica continued displaying patience, professionalism, and confidence. The contrast between expectation and reality was becoming difficult to ignore. Several nearby travelers had begun questioning their earlier assumptions. A businessman sitting near the boarding lane leaned toward another passenger. "She does not seem worried at all," he said quietly. The other traveler nodded. "That is what I keep noticing." Their conversation reflected a larger change spreading through the gate area. People were starting to pay attention to Monica herself rather than the rumors surrounding her. They noticed how respectfully she spoke to employees. They noticed her calm demeanor. They noticed that she never once complained about the inconvenience. Meanwhile, inside another section of the airport, additional details were beginning to emerge. Event coordinators reviewed schedules connected to a major infrastructure announcement planned for later that week. Monica's name appeared repeatedly throughout the documents. Strategic partner, lead investor, project visionary. Her role extended far beyond a ceremonial appearance. Entire sections of the airport expansion initiative existed because of agreements she had helped create years earlier. Richard Bennett looked at those documents and then at the gate information displayed on the screen. Something felt wrong. A woman with that level of influence should not be sitting alone waiting to board a flight while the airport leadership searched for her. Determined to understand the situation, he instructed several senior staff members to accompany him. Within minutes, preparations were underway. Back at Gate 42, boarding time continued approaching. Airline employees organized boarding groups while passengers gathered their belongings. Monica checked the time and quietly returned her documents to her bag. She remained completely unaware that decisions were being made across the airport because of her. Officer Daniel finally approached again. "Thank you for your patience," he said. "We are finishing a few final steps." Monica smiled politely. "No problem." Her answer surprised him once more. Most people would have shown frustration by now. Monica showed grace. And while the crowd continued watching, a series of urgent messages began moving through airport communication systems. Senior executives were leaving their offices. Vehicles were being prepared. A coordinated effort was suddenly moving toward one destination. Gate 42. Within minutes, the people who truly understood who Monica Hayes was would be on their way. And when they arrived, every assumption surrounding her would begin to collapse. Several floors above the terminal, the search for Monica Hayes had evolved from concern into urgency. Richard Bennett stood beside a conference table covered with schedules, presentation materials, and architectural renderings connected to the airport's largest expansion initiative in decades. Every important document seemed to contain the same name, Monica Hayes. Her influence appeared throughout transportation plans, investment agreements, workforce development programs, and long-term infrastructure strategies. Yet despite being one of the most important people involved in the project, nobody from the executive team had successfully reached her. An assistant entered the room carrying updated travel information. "We confirmed her location," she said. "She is still at Gate 42. Richard frowned. "Still?" The assistant nodded. "Yes, sir." Several executives exchanged confused looks. Monica had been expected for a private meeting before boarding. Her schedule had been arranged weeks in advance. Missing that meeting was unlike her. Richard checked the time again. Something clearly was not right. Meanwhile, at Gate 42, boarding preparations continued. Airline employees positioned themselves near the boarding lanes while passengers organized carry-on bags and travel documents. The atmosphere remained tense, though the reason for that tension was slowly changing. Earlier, many people had watched Monica with suspicion. Now some were beginning to question the assumptions that had created the situation in the first place. Monica sat quietly reviewing notes from her portfolio. Her ability to remain focused impressed several travelers nearby. Despite being surrounded by attention for nearly an hour, she had never raised her voice, demanded special treatment, or acted offended. Officer Daniel Pierce noticed it too. Every piece of information he reviewed reinforced the same conclusion. Monica presented no concern whatsoever. The original report contained little more than vague observations and personal impressions. Facts had never supported the suspicions. Yet the situation had continued because perception often moves faster than truth. Linda Foster remained seated across the gate. For the first time all afternoon, uncertainty began replacing confidence. She had expected validation. Instead, the longer the process continued, the more normal Monica appeared. Linda noticed something else as well. Other passengers were no longer looking at Monica with the same judgment. Some seemed sympathetic. Others appeared uncomfortable about how much attention had been directed toward her. Back inside the executive suite, another update arrived. Richard reviewed it quickly before making a decision. "We are going to her," he announced. The room immediately became active. Senior administrators gathered their materials. Event coordinators picked up phones. Transportation staff began making arrangements. Monica Hayes was not simply a guest. She was a partner whose vision had helped shape projects that would affect millions of travelers over the coming years. If she was still at Gate 42, then Gate 42 was where they needed to be. Richard grabbed his jacket and headed toward the exit. Several executives followed without hesitation. In another part of the airport, vehicles typically reserved for executive transportation began moving into position. Messages spread through internal communication channels. Staff members who understood Monica's importance suddenly realized where she had been all afternoon. Back at the gate, Monica closed her portfolio and glanced toward the departure board. Boarding would begin soon. She expected the day to continue exactly as planned. What she did not know was that a growing number of airport leaders were now moving rapidly in her direction. And as the first executive vehicles rolled into place outside the terminal, the countdown toward a revelation that would stun everyone at Gate 42 had officially begun. The distance between Gate 42 and the executive offices was not far, yet news seemed to travel even faster than people. Richard Bennett moved through the terminal surrounded by senior administrators, project directors, and airport leadership staff. Their pace was brisk enough to attract attention from employees along the way. Questions followed them from corridor to corridor. Why were so many executives moving together? What had happened? Few people received answers. The only thing that mattered was reaching Monica Hayes before her flight boarded. Back at the gate, Monica remained completely unaware of the activity unfolding elsewhere in the airport. She sat comfortably reviewing a final page of notes before placing the documents back into her portfolio. Around her, passengers continued preparing for departure. Boarding announcements were expected at any moment. Yet the unusual atmosphere surrounding the gate had not disappeared. Officer Daniel Pierce remained nearby, reviewing the last pieces of information available to him. Everything pointed toward the same conclusion. Monica had done nothing wrong. In fact, the more information he saw, the more confused he became about how the situation had escalated so far. The original concern contained almost no verifiable facts. It had been driven largely by perception. Daniel looked toward Monica and noticed something he had overlooked earlier. She carried herself like someone accustomed to responsibility. Her confidence did not come from arrogance. It came from certainty. People who spent years making important decisions often developed that kind of presence. Meanwhile, Linda Foster found herself growing increasingly uncomfortable. The certainty she had felt earlier continued fading. Passengers around her were no longer whispering about what Monica might have done. Instead, many seemed puzzled by why security was still involved at all. The narrative was changing. Assumptions that once felt easy now felt difficult to defend. A nearby traveler finally spoke aloud what several others were already thinking. If there was actually a problem, something would have happened by now. Another passenger nodded. Exactly. Their comments were quiet, but they reflected a growing shift throughout the gate area. Monica was no longer being viewed as a possible problem. She was beginning to appear like the victim of one. Several floors above, an airport operations manager reviewed a schedule one final time while riding an elevator toward the concourse. Monica's name appeared prominently across multiple documents. Strategic Development Partner, Infrastructure Advisory Chair, Lead Private Investor. Every title represented years of work. Every title represented influence that extended far beyond a single airport. What amazed the manager most was not Monica's success. It was the fact that she had never once used any of it to defend herself. Most people would have introduced their credentials immediately. Monica had chosen silence. At Gate 42, airline staff prepared to begin pre-boarding procedures. Passengers slowly formed loose lines. Monica rose from her seat and adjusted the strap of her bag. Daniel approached one final time. "Thank you again for your patience," he said. "We are nearly finished." Monica smiled politely. "I appreciate your professionalism." The response caught him off guard. She was thanking him. After everything that had happened, she was thanking him. Before Daniel could reply, a radio attached to another employee's uniform suddenly crackled with urgent communication. The employee listened, looked surprised, and immediately checked the gate number displayed overhead. Gate 42. Several more messages followed. Nearby staff exchanged confused glances. Something unusual was happening. Moments later, through the large terminal windows overlooking a service roadway, several black executive vehicles became visible, moving toward a secured entrance. Airport employees noticed first. Then passengers began noticing too. One vehicle became two. Two became four. Four became several more. The convoy moved with purpose. And as the first group of senior executives entered the concourse and headed directly toward Gate 42, the crowd realized they were about to witness something none of them would ever forget. The first executive appeared at the far end of the concourse so quickly that many passengers assumed there had been an emergency somewhere in the terminal. Then another appeared, and another. Within seconds, a growing group of senior airport leaders moved through the crowd with remarkable urgency. Their pace was fast enough to attract attention from everyone near Gate 42. Travelers stepped aside. Airline employees looked up from their work. Conversations stopped. The entire boarding area seemed to sense that something unusual was about to happen. Monica Hayes stood near the boarding lane with her travel bag resting at her side. She noticed the movement, but did not immediately recognize anyone approaching. Her attention remained focused on the departure process. Around her, however, curiosity was spreading rapidly. Officer Daniel Pierce followed the direction of everyone's gaze and saw the approaching group. The moment he recognized Richard Bennett among them, confusion crossed his face. Richard was not simply another executive. He was one of the most influential figures connected to the airport's long-term development projects. Daniel had seen him only during major events and important announcements. Seeing him moving this quickly toward Gate 42 made no sense. Linda Foster noticed the same thing. Her confidence disappeared almost instantly. The number of executives approaching continued growing. Several were familiar faces frequently featured in business publications and regional news coverage. Others wore identification badges that placed them at the highest levels of airport leadership. None of them appeared interested in the gate itself. Their focus seemed fixed on one destination. Monica. Richard Bennett reached the gate area first. Slightly out of breath from moving so quickly through the terminal, he scanned the crowd. The moment he spotted Monica, relief appeared across his face. "Monica," he said warmly as he approached. "There you are." The reaction around the gate was immediate. Passengers exchanged stunned looks. Airline employees froze. Daniel stared in disbelief. Monica smiled. "Richard," she replied. "Good to see you." Richard extended his hand and greeted her with obvious respect. "We have been looking everywhere for you." Monica laughed softly. "I have been right here." More executives arrived moments later. Some greeted her by name. Others thanked her for making the trip. Several spoke about meetings scheduled later that day. One executive mentioned preparations connected to the airport expansion initiative. Another referenced upcoming development announcements. Every conversation revealed another layer of Monica's importance. The crowd listened carefully. Piece by piece, the truth was becoming impossible to ignore. Daniel felt his stomach tighten as he watched the interactions unfold. The woman who had spent the afternoon answering questions from security was being greeted as an honored partner by the most powerful people in the airport. Linda looked away for a moment, struggling to process what she was seeing. Nothing matched the assumptions she had carried just an hour earlier. Richard turned towards several members of the executive team. "I told everyone we would not begin without her," he said with a smile. "After everything Monica has done for this project, that would be impossible." The statement landed heavily across the gate area. Travelers who had quietly judged Monica throughout the afternoon now understood that they had never known who she was. More importantly, they understood that she had never once attempted to tell them. She had never defended her status. She had never introduced her accomplishments. She had simply remained calm while others formed opinions. As the executives gathered around her, the atmosphere transformed completely. The crowd that once watched with suspicion now watched with admiration. And standing at the center of it all, Monica Hayes displayed the same quiet confidence she had shown from the very beginning. Yet the most powerful revelation had not happened yet, because in only a few more moments, Richard Bennett was about to explain exactly why the airport considered Monica Hayes one of the most important people to walk through its doors that year. The crowd around Gate 42 stood almost perfectly silent as Richard Bennett and the growing group of executives gathered around Monica Hayes. Only minutes earlier, many of the same people had watched her through the lens of suspicion. Now they watched with a completely different emotion. Curiosity had become astonishment. Monica greeted each executive warmly, shaking hands and exchanging brief conversations that clearly reflected years of professional relationships. There was familiarity between them. Respect. Trust. None of it could be faked. Richard finally turned toward the assembled group of airport leaders and smiled. "I think everyone is relieved we found you," he said. Monica laughed softly. "Apparently I was easier to lose than I realized." The executives around them laughed as well. The lighthearted moment eased some of the tension, but it also highlighted something important. These were not people meeting a stranger. These were people greeting someone they genuinely valued. Nearby passengers listened closely. Every word mattered now. Richard gestured toward one of the senior project directors. "The final presentation is ready," she said. "Everyone has been waiting for your review." Monica nodded. "I am looking forward to seeing it." Another executive stepped forward. "The Transportation Access Initiative exceeded projections. Your team was right about the long-term impact." Monica smiled. "That is wonderful news." The conversations continued naturally, but every exchange revealed another piece of the truth. Monica was not simply attending a meeting. She was one of the architects behind projects that had transformed how people moved through entire regions. Officer Daniel Pierce stood quietly nearby, absorbing everything. The more he listened, the more extraordinary the situation became. Throughout the afternoon, Monica had never mentioned her position. She had never referenced her accomplishments. She had never used her influence to change how she was treated. She simply cooperated. Linda Foster felt the weight of that realization even more strongly. Every assumption she had made now seemed smaller than ever. She remembered watching Monica sit quietly with her documents. She remembered convincing herself that Monica did not belong. Now she was standing only a few feet away from executives who clearly viewed Monica as one of the most important partners connected to the airport's future. Richard then looked towards several passengers who had gathered nearby. His expression became more formal. "Many of the improvements travelers see throughout this airport exist because of Monica's vision and investment," he said. The statement landed like a wave moving through the crowd. Some people exchanged shocked looks. Others simply stared. Richard continued. "The workforce training programs, transportation accessibility improvements, and several major infrastructure projects were made possible through partnerships she helped create. We would not be where we are today without her leadership." The silence that followed felt even more powerful than applause. Monica stood calmly while the words settled over the crowd. She did not appear interested in recognition. She seemed almost uncomfortable being placed at the center of attention. Yet the truth could no longer be hidden. The woman who had spent the afternoon under scrutiny was actually one of the people responsible for helping shape the airport's future. A nearby airline employee quietly shook her head in amazement. Several passengers looked toward Monica with expressions that reflected both admiration and regret. They were not simply surprised by her success. They were confronting the fact that none of them had seen it coming. Monica finally spoke. "Everything we have accomplished has been a team effort," she said. "Many people worked hard to make those projects successful." Her response reflected the same humility she had displayed all day. No boasting. No attempt to embarrass anyone. Just gratitude. The crowd listened carefully. And in that moment, the contrast became undeniable. While others had spent hours judging her appearance, Monica had spent years building opportunities that improved the lives of people she would never even meet. Yet the most important moment of the day was still approaching. Because before leaving the gate area, Monica would deliver one final lesson that nobody present would ever forget. For a few seconds after Monica Hayes finished speaking, nobody said a word. The terminal remained filled with people, yet the silence felt almost complete. Her response had been simple. She had redirected praise toward others. She had chosen gratitude over recognition. And in doing so, she revealed something that no title or accomplishment ever could. Character. Richard Bennett smiled as he looked around the gate area. He could see the realization spreading across the faces of passengers, employees, and even security personnel. The story everyone thought they understood at the beginning of the afternoon had turned out to be completely different. Monica was not the person they imagined. She was far more accomplished, far more influential, and far more gracious than any of them had expected. Richard checked the time and laughed softly. "Monica, we almost delayed half our schedule looking for you." The group around him smiled. Monica shook her head. "I suppose next time I should answer my phone." The comment drew light laughter from the executives. The tension that had defined the afternoon finally disappeared. Nearby passengers relaxed as well. What remained was reflection. Officer Daniel Pierce stepped forward. His expression was professional, but there was sincerity in his voice. "Ms. Hayes, I want to thank you for your patience today." Monica smiled warmly. "You were doing your job, Officer Pierce." Daniel nodded. Yet he knew there was more to it than that. Many people placed in Monica's position would have responded with anger. Others would have immediately used their influence to end the situation. Monica had done neither. She had allowed the process to unfold naturally. Her confidence came from knowing who she was without needing to prove it. Across the gate, Linda Foster stood quietly. The confidence that had once fueled her assumptions was gone. In its place was a difficult but important understanding. She had formed conclusions based on appearance rather than evidence. She had mistaken familiarity for truth. Monica noticed her standing there and offered a polite nod. The gesture surprised Linda. There was no resentment in it. No desire to embarrass her. Only kindness. That simple moment seemed to carry more weight than any confrontation ever could. Boarding announcements finally resumed. Airline employees reopened the boarding process, and passengers slowly returned to the practical business of travel. Yet something had changed. The people preparing to board would leave with more than luggage. They would leave with a lesson. As Richard and the executives prepared to accompany Monica toward her meeting, one of the project directors mentioned the transportation initiative again. Several passengers overheard details about workforce programs, community partnerships, and infrastructure investments that had helped improve opportunities for thousands of families. Each detail added perspective. The woman many had judged in a matter of seconds had spent years creating benefits that reached far beyond herself. Monica adjusted the strap of her bag and prepared to leave the gate area with the executive team. Before turning away, she glanced once more at the travelers gathered nearby. Some smiled. Others nodded respectfully. A few appeared thoughtful. Monica returned the gestures with quiet warmth. She did not need recognition. She did not need validation. She simply continued moving forward. Richard and the executives followed alongside her as they headed down the concourse. Conversations resumed throughout the terminal. Passengers returned to their seats. Employees returned to work. The airport returned to normal. Yet long after Monica disappeared from view, many people continued thinking about what they had witnessed. They remembered how quickly assumptions had formed. They remembered how completely those assumptions had collapsed. Most of all, they remembered the woman who never felt the need to announce her worth because she already knew it. And that was the lesson left behind at Gate 42 that afternoon. The people who truly understand their value rarely need to prove it. They simply live it. And eventually, the truth arrives on its own.